CertainPath talks about 30% of your time as a manager should be dedicated to hiring. Now, I'm not here claiming that I spend 30% of my time, but the message of you have to spend time is so critical. I think if you're really dedicated to it, there's been some coaches with CertainPath in the past that have talked about some of the processes and how you use Indeed and how you use different assessments and stuff. I think that's really important. I think if you spend dedicated time, you can find some candidates.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying they're sitting there waiting and you can have your pick of the litter.
It's hard.
But one of the things I find frustrating is when business owners do a really, really poor job of hiring. They'll do a 15-minute or a half an hour coffee break with this guy and then hire him.
Right.
And then they wonder why they have bad employees.
Right.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry to break it to you, but it's your own fault.
Yeah.
You got to do a better job hiring. You got to do a better job onboarding.
Yeah.
And so I'm a firm believer in spending time and effort and money on those things.
Sure.
And I'm happy to go into that more.
Yeah. I was like, for example, when you're interviewing, I know interviewing is so important, trying to figure out, do I have a good person here?
Yeah.
So what are some good questions or what are things you ask to draw out what kind of person I'm sitting across from?
So, all interviewing and hiring is sales to some extent. So I'll tell you what our process is for hiring.
Yeah.
Not saying we have it perfect, and I will tell you up front, we do not bat 1,000. I'll spend all this time and money and we'll still miss. But,
perfectly natural. Yeah.
Basically when I get an applicant in, I try and call them same day, 10-minute phone call. How you doing? I'll ask some pre-screen questions.
Yeah.
Like, would you be willing to pass a criminal record check and a drug test? Some things like that are sort of could potentially eliminate some headache for me.
Sure.
Then if we are interested, I will send them an email with a little video about us. We just have a YouTube video, Why Work at Brown's.
Oh, nice.
And then there's 2 assessments in there. So one is culture index. And the other one is an assessment that has some aptitude portions to it as well.
Okay.
Then if I are still interested and they're interested, we'll set an interview, an in-person. Typically make them come to my office and I'll give them a little tour. That interview is anywhere from half an hour. If I know early on I don't like them, I'll cut it short. If it's a good interview, it's north of an hour, probably 2.
Yeah.
Well, north of an hour. And I don't ask a lot of technical questions there.
Yeah.
I can see what they can do technically from their resume. I'm asking things like I'm looking for certain characteristics, like what's their attention to detail, how driven are they, how how goal-oriented are they? How good are they at interacting with customers? Will they take ownership for their own mistakes?
Right.
There's a book, as a side note, by Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player.
Mm-hmm.
Really worth a read. It has some good interview questions in there. And I think my best interviews, we get really personal. Like I've had people, almost talking about their past and almost needing a tissue and that type of thing.
Sure.
And then I know that I've got somebody who's being really genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, if they're on board, I will set a ride along.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they will come ride with one of our technicians, usually like a sort of like a crew lead type position for minimum a half a day. I do not pay them for this.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't pay them for that because if they demand money, they're probably not the right person for me.
Right.
We will buy them lunch and I will try and get as many people in that room for lunch as possible.
Very good.
Like CSRs, whatever. And then, we'll usually at that point do a second interview with another manager. And so that would be sort of my minimum, and I'll call references. So that's sort of my minimum to hire anybody.
That's great.
So I would say before I hire anybody, I probably have 4 to 5 hours of my own time invested plus that ride along.
Yeah. That's important.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Now, is it mostly only experienced technicians you're hiring, or
No.
you do it so you have a lot of apprentices as well?
Yep. Yeah, and that's that same, we follow those same steps.
Yeah.
We might abbreviate some of them if it's a more entry level position, but basically it's the same steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then would you like to talk about training a little bit?
Yeah, let's go to the onboarding. I mean, the next step on onboarding,
yeah.
after they're hired, let's go ahead and cover that.
So we've tried to really drill down into that. We will spend basically the first week. The first day is kind of, hey, we want you to feel loved. We want you to feel welcome. We want you to feel like you're here. We want you to know who your manager is. We want you to know you can talk to people.
Yeah.
Then we kind of the rest of that first week is a combination of following CertainPath's onboarding process with the videos and how to run a perfect service call, talking about a technician. And then they will spend a half a day riding along, sitting along with our CSRs.
Yeah.
They will spend a half a day with our warehouse person. They'll spend a half a day with our bookkeeper.
That's great.
Then the second week, kind of as a minimum, they would be riding along with somebody else while we try and get at least a few role plays in with them throughout the week.
Yeah.
So minimum 2 weeks would be that onboarding before we would let them run a call on their own.